all of those combined, every value less than 1.0 sums to 3.7, which is precisely the value of the flaw questions. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Seven Sage podcast. We are your hosts this week, ZeSean and Nicole. We're glad to have you back for what we think is kind of an exciting episode where we've got some data to share on the most frequent question types that come up on the most recent PTs. And maybe a quick disclaimer is this is just the data we have. We've selected the most recent PTs because we believe those are most indicative of what's going to show up on the real test. These are 140 through 158. And we only have the data that the LSAT gives us. But the good news is this is also the data that you're practicing with. So to the extent that you trust your practicing, you could maybe trust this data. Nicole, do you want to get started with what do you see as frequent question types? And maybe the question here is, does this data alter how you would tell somebody to study for the test, given what you see as coming up most often?
Okay, that's a great question. I've never looked at this before, so I'm excited. So I already went into this knowing, like most of us know, that flaw questions are probably the most common. So I'm not surprised. It's not a shocker that flaws are at the very, very tippy top of this list with an expected about 3 to 5 questions per test guaranteed. But we also see we have quite a few necessary assumption questions, strength and weaken, MSS, most strongly supported questions, and then not super surprised to see at the very bottom of the list on the other side of the spectrum, questions that only appear like once out of every 10 questions. The miscellaneous ones. Every 10 sections?
Yeah, one in every 10 sections, you'll see a miscellaneous.
Really? Oh my gosh, wait. Me considering myself a STEM major, I didn't even know how to interpret this number. Okay, one in every 10 sections. That's scary. Miscellaneous, point at issue, must be false, evaluate. Not surprising. Those are like more of the rare ones we get. So in terms of your second question, how I would utilize this data for studying. Well, okay, a question I get asked pretty often in those study plan workshop classes we teach like almost every day of the week is, Nicole, what's some way that I can like overnight improve by like 5 points? I'm like, well, that's a scary question to ask.
A lot of people ask that question in different ways. Right. Yeah.
They're like, how can I wake up and be an LSAT guru overnight? Well, one thing that you might want to do is to give yourself the biggest chance of jumping points is maybe to target one of those super common questions. So like if you make yourself a wizard at flaw questions, like you can nail 100% of flaw questions, then you know you're guaranteed, according to this chart, 3.7 points per section on average. So that's one way you might be able to build yourself a couple points is just by targeting those really common questions. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's no surprise that flaw comes up a lot. And I think the reason flaw comes up a lot, about 4 questions per section is what we anticipate, is because doing flaw questions tests your understanding of arguments. Think about what you have to do in a flaw question. You have to identify a conclusion. You have to identify the premises, the support for that conclusion. And then you have to, what we call pre-phrasing, think through what the gap in that argument is, how those premises don't support that conclusion. And you'll come up with, well, what logical error are they making? And then you'll have to find that in the answer choices. So you're doing a lot of work that tests your understanding of nearly every part of an argument. So flaw questions are great. They're all encompassing. There's a reason I think the test makers like them. The other thing I would add to that, going off that same strain of thought, is like the same type of skill set is found in strengthened questions, weakened questions, and even sufficient assumption, where you are looking at an argument that is incomplete, right? That has a flaw, that has a gap, that's not airtight. And you're looking for ways to either strengthen it, weaken it, tear it apart, complete it. And so I'm not surprised that you see 4 flaw questions a section, 2 strengthen, 2 weaken, and then almost 2 sufficient assumptions. And then you have also, throw in a parallel reasoning and a parallel flaw, and you've got like almost half your section is testing the same skill set, which is like, can you break down an argument? Go ahead.
And you have one argument part and one main point. per
There you
section
go.
as well. So there's just 2 more points that are just, can you label the premise and the conclusion, step 1.
Exactly. Right. So, to your point is like, so what I would tell people is like, okay, can you name your the premises? Can you identify your conclusion? And can you identify the gap in how the premises don't fully support that conclusion? That's going to get you through half
Absolutely.
the section, right?
Literally.
Yeah.
And maybe we could talk about, so if you want to be a guru overnight or over some frequency or some distance of time. I've said all the wrong word. Frequency, distance, length. That's what I was looking for. Length of time. Literally every
I knew
incorrect
what
word
you meant.
possible.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. I think
Yeah.
I understand. I didn't even catch that you were using different words.
I'm like claiming that I was a STEM graduate and like I don't know how statistics work or
You
how
were what was your
degrees of
major?
measurement,
What was your undergrad major?
molecular biology,
No, I
but
was
I don't
chemistry.
need to
Did you
know
know that?
stuff. I did not know that. I knew you were a STEM king, but I didn't
Uh-huh.
know it was chemistry. Very
Oh, I
cool.
wouldn't
Very
say
cool.
STEM king. I would say STEM like I crashed out of STEM, hence law school. Like
Yeah,
and
same.
we're both going to
Same.
law school this fall. Like and so clearly our career as scientists did not work out.
Yeah, so we're the most qualified possible people to be here talking about data with you guys. But
Yeah,
maybe
right.
for those people that do want to improve those points on those questions we just talked about that make up like half the section, basically, maybe we could talk about some drills or some kind of like challenges you can work on that will help you incorporate those skills. So maybe we could start with labeling. So what are some specific drills that might help you practice or skills for labeling premises and conclusions? We'll start from like square one. What do you got?
You know, what do I got? This is a good question. I mean, I think drilling, first of all, drilling main point and main conclusion questions is maybe a great start where you
Mhm.
maybe do sets of 5, sets of 10, sets of 15. Start at an easy difficulty. Learn your conclusion indicator words like thus and therefore and hence. Also, your
Mhm.
premise indicators like because and for and since, things that, signal supporting evidence.
Mhm.
And go through and try to see, if you can really pick apart an argument. What is the author trying to conclude and how are they backing it up? And those are the questions that should be in your head. You should do that for every type of question in this vein, right? So
Yeah. And
maybe, yeah, go
maybe
ahead, Nicole. Yeah.
more like a philosophical, I guess, conceptual trick you could try as you're working on main point. Something I like to tell students is like if you're not 100% sure what the main conclusion of the argument is, do a little why test. So like whatever you
Mm,
think the conclusion is, highlight it in your pink highlighter or whatever on the screen. Read it to yourself and be like, "Okay, how do I know this is true?
yeah.
What's giving me support for this statement?" If
Right.
I'm able to locate something else like literally written there in other words like with a different color highlighter that supports it, then that's fine. But if I
Hmm.
can't find anything else, then this can't be the conclusion. So if you're really
Mm,
struggling, you could do exactly what ZeSean described. Like let's say you do a set of 5 MP questions. Before you click submit or before you move to the next question, just double check, okay, let me do my why test. Does the phrase that I pick like pass the why test? Is there an answer why? If not, let me reevaluate and redo that. Or that could be like your blind review of the set. So that could be a good way. Same with argument part. You really the same skills we're talking about here. Find your conclusion, ask your why test, uh, and then from there maybe like reverse engineer all the other stuff like your premise, sub conclusion. Which sub conclusion, fun fact, also should pass the why test. Right? There should be some form of support. So those little tricks could help tighten up a question type or a skill that's going to help you everywhere.
yeah.
What about maybe okay, so that was labeling for MP, AP. That at least guarantees you 2 points per section.
Yeah.
Um
Right.
at the
Right.
at the minimum. Okay, what about let's add on the spotting gap stuff. So like another what is it? Like 5, 6 points from weekend strength and eval. What can we do to tighten that up?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe one thing to get in the habit of doing, maybe speaking philosophically, I like how you put it there, is you should look at your maybe for every conclusion and premise you identify, you should ask yourself, well, is this an airtight argument? Does this premise or do these premises when I take them, do they absolutely prove this conclusion, or is there any gap I can identify where there might be a blind spot?
Mhm.
So Henry loves to use the example of like people who smoke tend to have cancer. Therefore, smoking causes cancer, right? So you see a correlation, you have a causation. Can you think through things, statements that, if true, would disrupt your ability to tease out that conclusion from that premise? So, of course, you have this correlation. We can take that as a fact, but maybe there are other things contributing to the cancer, right? And get yourself in the habit of thinking around the argument that, okay, they're trying to give me this, they give me this fact, and now they're trying to tease out a conclusion. Is there anything else that could explain that conclusion? So maybe I'm speaking a little abstract here. Maybe you have better drills, Nicole.
No, I like how we're doing a combo of like abstract, but also like literally what could you do? So I think we name drop this drill like literally almost every week on the podcast. So you might have heard this ad nauseum, but you could do a pre-phrasing drill, right? Exactly what ZeSean is describing in practice would be like you read your stimulus and you have like a post-it or your hand or whatever covering the answer choices so you can't see them yet. And you come up with like what's fishy, yeah, like what's missing, etc. And then you see how well you were able to predict. Of course, you can't always predict. There's stuff that's not predictable. Similarly, again, me just like shouting out random crazy things people ask me in the chat. They're like, "Do you think it's possible to predict every single question on the LSAT ever?" I'm like, no, I can't get in the mind of the LSAT writer. Of course, there's some I would never have predicted, but it definitely gets you a good chunk of the way there if you can pick up some of these patterns, even if there's going to be one every once in a while that you're like, I can't come up with anything here. And if you can't come up with anything during your pre-phrasing exercise, maybe have like a sheet next to you of takeaways and write some like general notes for next time. Like, for example, you come across a flaw question and it's like a belief versus fact flaw. Like it's an opinion and you didn't catch the fact that they're talking about people's opinions instead of actual facts. So your takeaway on your sheet might be like, oh my God, next time I see the word like in their opinion or like they believe that, like any phrase that alludes to an opinion, like red alarm bells are going to ring in my head and I'm going to be like belief versus fact. So anything where you can keep track of like patterns that maybe you missed the first time, but next time you're going to be able to pick up on that gap will help you with those questions.
Yeah, I wanted to say a quick thing about pre-phrasing because I loved what you were saying there. I think that's such a good tip. And a lot of times people maybe are afraid to pre-phrase because they don't think they're going to get it right or they might go down the wrong train of thought. It's a great mental exercise anyway. Even if you dreamed up 3, 4 flaws that were not in any of the answer choices, you still showed yourself that you knew what the conclusion was, you knew what the supporting evidence was, and you identified the gap or you identified multiple gaps, and you're practicing your ability to grapple with an argument, and that's a great thing to be able to do on the fly quickly, and then the answer choice might not capture that, but you've already been thinking about it, so when you see the right answer choice, it'll click for you more easily, I think, and you'll be able to avoid traps too. Yeah.
Totally agreed. And if you ever don't know where, like, if you come up with some extra flaw or extra gaps that didn't come up in any of the answer choices, in the explanation video for that question, like in the discussion, you can go to the discussion and like drop your thoughts. Like that gives you an opportunity to play LSAT writer and like give people your ideas. And maybe you'll start a chat going and other people will be like, oh, snap, I never thought of that. So that could be your moment to be a creative LSAT writer. I
That
think a
reminds
really
me of our
similar,
episode about community. So good reference
real,
there. Yeah.
yes,
Sorry, you were gonna say
very
something. Go
true.
ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just thinking another version of that, like coming up with your own answer choices in a way, would be maybe when you do like parallel questions, for example, as you go through the answer choices. This might be kind of hard to describe, but it's something a lot of people do subconsciously already. Like you start reading your answer choice, and at some point midway through, you pause and you're like, okay, in order for this answer choice to be parallel, what needs to come next? If that makes sense. Like, let's say you already read the premise, you just saw the word hence is the next word you're about to read. You're like, okay, pause. For this to be the right answer, what does it need to say? Hence, blah, 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 blah. And if it doesn't match up with what you're predicting, that's not the parallel answer choice. So that's another really good exercise you could try is like almost like filling in the missing piece of the answer choices and see if they actually meet your prediction. And I mean, technically the right answer should, or like fixing the wrong answer in a way, like find the wrong answers and see if you can rewrite them into something that's actually parallel. So a lot of people, I totally agree. They're like, oh, what's the point? I'm like wasting my time doing that. You're not, because if anything, you're just adding more practice on top. Like instead of just spending 2 minutes on a question, you just turned one question into like a longer exercise that gave you way more opportunity to learn stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you know what really wastes time is like going into the answer choices blind and then getting stuck on every single one, being like, oh, well, that kind of sounds nice. And I'm sure everybody who's watching this, including, and including us in this conversation, we've all been there where we're like, that sounds nice. I don't know. Like, this kind of sounds like something. And the thing is, like, the answers are worded precisely to trap you like that because they all sound pretty, but they're not capturing what you need to get at. And the only way to really filter through is to have an idea of what you're looking for before you ever look at those answer choices. Sorry, I don't know if that made sense. That was a little
No,
cluster of
literally,
words,
it
but
was perfect.
yeah, I
Agreed.
appreciate it. Yeah. Um,
Agreed.
I was going to say, while we're on this topic of most frequent question types, we talked about half the LR section predictably being, assessing arguments. Um, the other common question types are like most strongly supported, right? Must be true, must inference. So, and the underlying skill is conditional reasoning. Can you map out your conditional arrows? Can you draw your logical chain links of conditional statements? So, the first most common question type, flaw. The second most necessary assumption. Number three, most strongly supported, which is going to test your conditional reasoning. Maybe we're going to make a very radical claim here that, like, if you can pick apart arguments and draw out all your conditionals, you can get through pretty much the entire LR section. I mean, those are the two skills that lie underneath pretty much all the questions, right? I mean, Nicole, do I sound radical? Do I? Yeah.
Totally agree. I mean, on one hand, at Seven Sage, we're categorizing every question into like its own little bubble, and there's all these different kinds. But at the same time, bigger picture, you're right. Like most of the questions share one really large common skill of either evaluating an argument or like inferring something from an argument or being able to diagram stuff. And those skills alone are going to carry you through basically the entire LR section. So maybe if you don't want your studying to just look like, oh, one day I'm going to do only this question, another day I'm going to do only this question. If you don't want to be like segregating by question, like dividing up your days by question, another thing you could do is divide up your days by skill. So like certain days of the week, I'm going to focus on conditionals, and that would be like your MBT, SA, PSA rule, MBF, whatever. Certain days of the week, I'm going to do spotting gap, flaw, weaken, strengthen, whatever, SA, NA. I mean, some overlap, I guess.
Well, maybe I'll jump in real quick, Nicole, and say a little plug for the new Seven Sage website, which allows you to make skill based drills, not just question type based drills. So,
Very cool.
your recommendation is on point, and the new website can facilitate that for the not
Very good
this.
shout out.
This is a shameless plug. Yeah. Anyway, you were
Very
saying,
good
not to
plug.
interrupt.
No. That was all I had really. So yeah, use the new Seven Sage tools. Very good plug, Zishan. To create skill-based drills as opposed to just question type based drills. I guess maybe it's kind of like a trade-off. Maybe while you're in the curriculum, you're more like question specific. But when you're done with the curriculum and you're like in drill mode, that's when you're more like skill specific. Because another thing I feel like happens to a lot of students, maybe a similar situation. I mean, for me too, maybe you too, Zishan, is like when you take a PT, it's not like you're going to see, oh, every single question I got wrong was like a weekend question. Okay, so now I need to work on weekend. Like it's going to be a mix of stuff you get wrong. And for some students, they're like, okay, how do I figure out what my weakness is if it's just a total mix? Well, maybe if you zoom in a little bit, you'll see that they might seem like very different questions, but at the end of the day, the thing you missed in all of them was a skill like spotting a gap, for example.
Yeah, I guarantee 99% of the folks watching, we're making data driven claims now. So I feel like I've got some numbers in my head. 99% of you watchers out there, listeners, are probably getting, when you get a question wrong, here's what went wrong. It's either you missed what the conclusion and premises were, you got those wrong. You did not correctly identify a gap in the reasoning or prephrase a gap in the reasoning if it was an argument question, or you messed up on your conditional logic diagrams. So you mistaked a sufficient for a necessary condition somewhere. Yeah, or you misunderstood your task, which is why, to your point, Nicole, it's not a bad idea to drill question types so you know what you're being asked. So I know when I see necessary assumption, this is what I need to do. So so maybe the last thing on my list is if you missed a question, you might have misunderstood your task. you might have been looking for a necessary assumption when really it should have been a sufficient assumption. But those are like the 4 or 5 things that I think if anybody out there has missed a question, we all have. One of those things probably went wrong, right?
Agreed. And I think we gave skills for all of those. Your last point, really, really good that you misunderstood your task. Something you could do for that is in the curriculum, there's like a question STEM quiz. There's one like halfway through the curriculum and then one at the very end of the curriculum where you can quiz question STEMs. They're like flashcards and you like uncover them. So that's really cool, especially for students that get confused between like an essay question and NA question, or like PSA rule versus PSAA or something. But you can also just like make a drill of questions. I mean, check the stems, and then once you've submitted it, you'll see what the categorization was. So that could be your way of checking, like, did I actually know what type of question that was? So that could be a good one too.
That's a great drill. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Use the curriculum. Right. Another plug, I guess, for
Yeah.
7Sage features.
Although I would hope that those of you that are listening, for the bang of your buck at 7Sage, you're using some form of the curriculum, because that is what the bread, the butter to our bread, the bread,
the butter to
of our
the
butter,
bread. Yeah.
whatever you
It's
call it.
foundational. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's what, yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I just want to give go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Eric Broner, who compiled this data set for us and allowed us to maybe make some of these data driven claims. Eric is also, yeah, shout out EB. Also, fun fact from Eric, the values that are less than 1.0 on our data set. So these are the questions that appear less than once in a given section. So you'll really see them maybe once every 2 sections or 3 sections, not even quite every section, the LR section. All of those combined, every value less than 1.0 sums to 3.7, which is precisely the value of the flaw question. So flaw questions appear more or as much as every other rare question type, basically. And I think we've talked about everything now. We've talked about every question type, I believe, that appears at least once every LR section. We didn't talk about every single one that doesn't appear in every LR section. But again, they are so rare that maybe you don't really need to worry about them. And I think the skills that we talked about do apply also to those. So
absolutely. Yeah, I think that was like a really good summary. So I guess pick your poison. Either be a wizard at flaw questions or be able to do every niche random once every 10 section question. So I think flaw and gap spotting is gonna be the big contender here.
Immense conditionals.
Yep.
That's where you should, if you're not thinking about it like that, start thinking about it like that. You are going to feel so much better. Yeah.
Yep. So we challenge you all to brush up on your argument labeling, spotting gaps, and conditional diagramming skills. And if you want more in-depth discussion of any of those things, we have podcast episodes for a lot of those. We have a whole episode we did recently about diagramming tips. We have a whole episode we did about how you spot the gap and drills you could do for that. So you can always check in or live classes. So that might be a good place to check it out. I have a fun closing question. Maybe not that fun, but a fun closer here is maybe we could say what our favorite LR question is. So lame of us, but I'm going to think for a second what mine is. Oh, I was thinking type, but I guess if you have a favorite, like an actual favorite question.
I don't remember the stimuli. Yeah. Yeah.
No, yeah, I'm thinking like a favorite type of LR question.
Mine is going to sound so basic. I am going to say flaw. Because I think
that's not basic.
And I just think it, to me, when I learned flaw questions, it showed me that I knew basically what I needed to know to do any part of this test, So that I have to say flaw there. Yeah.
No, I mean, imagine I go the opposite. I'm like, miscellaneous is my favorite.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go, this is going to be like a hot take, but I think parallel is actually my favorite question type.
That is a hot take. That's the most hated question type on earth.
It is, but in my strong opinion, and I think JY has said this a few times in the curriculum. So don't hate me, hate JY if this hurts your feelings. But
you can't just cite JY. That's an appeal to authority, Nicole. That's a argument.
That is a flaw.
No, yeah,
that's an appeal to authority. But JY always says Yeah. JY always says that parallel questions are like technically like a freebie. Like as long as you accurately diagram the structure of the argument, it should be like a freebie because they're not going to throw traps at you or tricks. It's just like, can you label the argument and can you label the answer choices? So unlike other question types where like weaken, strengthen, RRE, like they'll throw in some answer choices with some crazy assumptions. And like, I just maybe, let's say, totally miss that. And then, dang, like I fell into a huge trap. Like, you can't really fall into a trap in parallel as long as you actually label the argument well. So it's really like a test of your skill. And none of that funny business the LSAT writers throw for the most part. So that's why I like parallel. It's like very to the point and robotic and straightforward. Like, do you know how to label or not? So
It's
I love that.
the STEM king in you that's coming
Very
out.
math of me.
Math of
Very
you, yeah.
math of me. I hate all those social science questions like RRE, get that out of here. We can strengthen, no thanks. But like
Yeah.
MBT, SA, parallel, all the straightforward like puzzle ones, I love those.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a way to play to your strengths in this test. And if you're, whatever way you naturally think, I think there's a type of question that will jive with you. And then you just got to learn the other ones, right? But I will say about parallel reasoning, I was teasing you a little bit, but Henry and I last week, or maybe it was a week before, we actually landed on, I don't know if you saw that episode, but we landed on how like parallel questions are really like that's the bread and butter. If you learn those, you can do pretty much everything that's easier than them, right? Like if you can do a parallel reasoning, you can definitely do a flaw and a strengthen and a weaken, right? Because argument structure so well. So in that sense, I'll affirm. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, real. So we recommend you guys. No, just kidding. If you can go
Yeah.
out there and solve like 5 really, really hard parallel questions, you've just done yourself a fantastic service, and maybe the rest will feel like cake after that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And maybe
you love
one
them or
thing,
you hate them, but they're helpful.
they are help. Right. Right. And sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, like, on our data sheet, we see that parallel reasoning comes up once per section. Parallel flaw also comes up once. So you'll see 2 parallel questions, but that doesn't mean like the infrequency shouldn't deter you from studying them, right? Like there are meaningful skills to learn and practice on pretty much every question type. They have, just transferable skills. So maybe the big conclusion also is like, don't let the frequency of question type, this is kind of goes against our whole thesis of this episode, but like don't let the frequency deter you from study or encourage you, because the skills are the same, right? Anyway, yeah.
Very true. Very true. And a lot of the question types that are rare in LR, I know we're not talking about RC today really, but those skills also appear like in RC. So like point at issue, agree, only once per 10 sections. But in RC, pretty often you're going to have a question that's like, which one of the following would person X agree with? Arguably, like, I don't know the data on that, so I'm just randomly pulling numbers in the air, but I'm going to guess at least every passage has a question that's like someone's point of view, agree or disagree question. So even though they might be rare on LR, it's still really valuable to practice them because that will help you quite a bit in RC. Similarly, like inference questions or like evaluating questions absolutely are going to be in RC too, because you have to, which one of the following can be inferred from the passage? Which one of the following would most undermine or most question, like kind of weakening, I guess, undermine the claim made on line 12. So all of these skills are transferable across the whole LSAT too. So don't let the frequency be the only reason you do or don't study something. But I guess big takeaway is just focus on the skills.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's a great takeaway. I appreciate
Very cool.
that.
Well,
yeah. I wish I had known when I was studying for the test.
well, I didn't know anything about frequency when I was studying, so I guess I've learned.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything until today, so I learned something new today.
Yeah.
As did all the listeners, I hope.
Yeah, this is so fascinating.
So hopefully,
yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Hopefully you guys found some fun little tidbits of info today, some Easter eggs to take with you on the rest of your studying journey. If you end up having any other questions or want to see us cover another topic in a future episode, drop your questions in the comments. I'm a terrible YouTuber. And what do they say? Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, as they say. And we'll be back at you guys in future episodes. Thanks for tuning in.
Peace.